Okay. Right off the bat, I want to welcome everybody to the meeting tonight. I want to begin by just a few things right off the bat. One, I want to thank former Chair Sean, Commissioner Shivers, and Commissioner Nguyen for their work this past year as Chair and Vice Chair. One of the things I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that I value your input, I value your participation, and I understand that everybody has a lot of things they could be doing during this time. You're all volunteers, and that's greatly appreciated. Next, I want to offer my condolences to Senator James Manning, whose wife passed recently. I happen to be privileged to be a pallbearer. He has been a great participant in this community as far as he's been on this commission, and he served in various ways. That's kind of want to make sure on this meeting and for the record that we offer our condolences to a person who's going through a lot right now. If Jeremy can put on the screen real quick of on our bios, just a little house cleaning. I have always felt that when we, let's see here.
It's sharing.
It's sharing now?
Yeah, it is sharing there.
So I've always felt that the community needs to see, in my opinion, who we are. So myself, as well as the vice chair, have added our pictures, to our bio, because we have a very diverse group that's on this board. And I think that the more we share that, I believe it adds a lot of trust to what we're doing. So you can see my picture with my bio. If you want to, this is not something that's mandatory. If you would like to add your profile picture, send it to Jeremy. You can also show you Vice Chair Silverio Mogart is also as well. If you also want to update your bios in any way, that's something that you're welcome to do. Send that to Jeremy and he can get that updated. Often things change within a year. Maybe you're no longer doing something that you're a part of. Use that opportunity to kind of update our bios. And if you'd like to add a picture to your profile, that's great. One of the things that I want to make sure that you know from me is that we spent a lot of quality time on our top 14 priorities. Those priorities will be the roadmap that I use. So the things that we talked about, the things that I would like for us to address are the things that were brought up in our meeting where everybody brought up their top things. So those items are what I look at as far as how do we take it from a plan, action, results. I'm kind of a result-oriented type person. So I want to make sure that we always laser focus on the business that's at hand. We can always meet each other anytime we want to talk about things of the world, but I want to make sure that we're really laser focusing on what we're doing as a police commission here in Eugene. If you could take a moment and review the agenda. Does anyone have any questions on the agenda? If there are no questions on the agenda, I would move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
So if anybody's interested in public comment, if you could please raise your hand. There are currently no hands raised.
Okay.
No hands raised. No
hands raised. Okay. So now I'll be heading into liaison reports. On liaison reports, in the past, we had, basically two, Amanda and Michael Hames Garcia did the liaison report. I'm going to expand that a little bit different as far as how I'm going to do it. The liaison report, because the Eugene Council, we have two liaisons from the council, who is Councilor Zelinka and Councilor Ye. So I'll be putting them in the area of liaison reports. I know that Councilor Ye is not here this evening. So and also also HRC Chair Amanda McCluskey is not here. So I will begin with a liaison report from Michael Haynes Garcia.
Thank you. So apologies for being a little bit late. I was having trouble figuring out the links, but the Civilian Review Board met last month. We haven't met yet in July, so that meeting will be next week. We were joined by police auditor, or former police auditor, Mark Gisner, who stepped in or returned to us from his retirement to help out with his report on the investigation into a deadly force case from December 2019 or late November 2019. It was a long meeting and a very thorough one with a lot of viewpoints expressed. I encourage people to take a look at it if you have a chance. I believe that's already been posted onto YouTube. Yeah, that was basically, it was quite a discussion. There was a long discussion, particularly about the IDFIT investigation. And there were concerns that were raised about both the IDFIT process as well as some of the timing for the auditor's office and how they dealt with addressing things, and with the police commission, or sorry, the police department's own investigation as well. There was basically a lot of really robust conversation. I think those who were there would agree with that. There are some new members coming on. I think that the two who have left are Rick Rosetta, although I wasn't not quite sure about that, and who's the other? Lindsay, our former chair. Thank you, Leah. And the other news, I think Leah might better speak to this. The auditor's office is hiring.
Yes.
Yes, there's an ad up.
All right, thank you, Michael. Since right now we do not have any more liaison reports, I'll be going into commissioner reports. Commissioner Nguyen.
Hi, thanks, Dallas. I just wanted to thank everyone for your vote last meeting, and for voting me in as for another term as vice chair. But I've decided not to take this challenge on at this time. I've spoken to Dallas and Silverio about this. I really appreciate your support, and I hope you can understand my decision. Dallas, Silver, if I can be of any assistance at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you for stepping up, Dallas. And I'd like to echo your words on the loss of LaWanda Manning, and what a heartbreak that is for our, not just our community, but our entire state. And my heart goes out to Senator Manning as well. I would also like to express concern. I don't see, maybe I'm missing it, I don't see Silver here, and I remember that he promised at the last meeting to attend every meeting. Is he okay? Other than that, that's my only question.
As far as if he's okay, I don't know the answer to if he's okay, but I do know that he's currently not in attendance. And he notified us that he wouldn't be in attendance.
Thank you.
Commissioner, yeah, Commissioner Dominguez.
I guess the only thing is I went to one of the sweeps some days ago, and that was interesting. It sounded to me like some of the officers felt like it was kind of weird when it is that they're called upon to do a sweep. The city has rules for how it is that a camp can be in a certain place and be considered, within the rules or whatever. But when they're actually called in to come help for a sweep, it seems it's just very inconsistent, and there's a lot of confusion as to what's within, their regulation. Like if it's in a park, then, they have a little bit more that they can regulate, but then if it's outside of a park, then like the rules change. So I think that that's kind of confusing for the police. And also, just as a really tiny little note, nitpicky because I studied public relations, but I thought that it was kind of a little bit annoying that the city puts the police on top when it says that the police is going to come in and as part of the sweep, it puts it before the city. And I feel like the city is the one that's initiating that. So I feel like they should be below that. And I know the guy from the city was like, oh, it doesn't mean anything, but I'm like, it's PR, like it still means something. So I think that doesn't put the police in a good light. As far as I could tell, I thought that the interactions, I got there a little bit late for some of them because I went from one to the next, but the interaction seemed pretty okay. Some of the officers did have the little cards of resources, but some of them didn't. Well, actually, no, I scratched that. The city didn't have the cards, but the police officers had the cards. So again, I feel like that's not great, and there should be some kind of consistency. I don't know who gets handed out the cards. So, but it sounded like it's inconsistent whether or not you're giving the resource cards out. I'm still learning, but it sounds hard. And the last thing is, I guess some of the officers would like more of the city council and other commissioners to come to the sweeps to kind of see what's going on. Okay, that's it. Thanks. Oh, and I am not familiar with Senator Manning as much, but any loss is lamentable, so sorry.
If there is one thing that you could do for me, Senator Dominguez, could you put that experience in like a small report and maybe send it to me so there's something where I won't be forgetting about what you're talking about? If there's any way we can expand or elaborate on those type of things in the future, it's good to have some type of record of it.
Okay, sure, cool.
Okay, Michael Haynes Garcia, would you like to have any comments? I know you did the liaison report. I don't know if you have any other.
No, I'm good. Thank you. I always forget that it comes around twice.
Commissioner Winbrock.
Hi, nothing to report today. Just wanted to congratulate you again and thank both Sean and V for the work that they did as chair and vice chair. Very much appreciate y'all and y'all's leadership and looking forward to continuing to serve with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Robertson.
Hi, I'm just happy to be here with you all and see all your faces finally. Hopefully we'll get back to in-person meetings soon. Again, just dittoing my fellow commissioners. Sorry to Senator Manning, it was a great loss, and I'm excited about tonight's meeting.
Okay, next we have our chief's report. Chief Skinner is not here. We have the privilege of having Captain Sean Adams. Captain Adams, can you give us the chief's report?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. The chief left me nothing to report on, so I'm at a loss of words, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up from the commission. So,
well, I want to start right off the bat with a question, then we can go for any other questions. You expressed in your last, in one of our last meetings, let me know if I'm wrong, a 33% spike in dealing with domestic violence.
correct.
You also gave us a lot of information, and you also shared with us some ways that you felt that those numbers could go down or opportunities that you had with domestic violence. My question to you is this: how could we as a police commission assist you in any way to get whatever the program that you were talking about in effect and started?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways right here off the top that we can think of. And when we talk about domestic violence, particularly through the commission and your work, awareness and communication is key in domestic violence cases. So one of the things that we know through our work in domestic violence in particular is that domestic violence hits us in areas that we wouldn't normally expect. That would be we were just talking about my visit to our homeless camps, for a better term. It's particularly hitting in those areas because of the economic dependence on one partner for another, and so on. And so there's some aspects there when we look at domestic violence cases where communication and awareness is key. One of the things that we push as a police agency right now, particularly in light of the championships that we just had, the Olympic qualifiers, if you see something, say something, and that applies particularly to domestic violence. And we can't be everywhere, and we need the more eyes that we can on this. One of the things that we're talking about in the last commission meeting, which is a goal for us organizationally, is the development of a family violence unit, but most particularly is the development of a domestic violence advocate response type unit. And for those of you that weren't here, and for those of you who may recall, that would be having volunteer domestic violence advocates that are specifically trained in dealing with and supporting victims of domestic violence, having them respond to the scene at the time of arrest to fill that gap between the time of arrest to time of arraignment, which is when the Lane County Victims Assistance would pick up the support for the victim. That is a goal for our organization, and that will happen. It's just now a matter of how do we figure out how to fund this? In Dallas, after the last meeting, you had mentioned doing a public campaign to try to garner some money. And I've talked to Chief Skinner about that. One of the things that we have to look at is when we build in a program, we have to look at sustainability of that program. And in order to do that, we have some pretty significant financial constraints within this agency right now. And particularly in light of the revenue losses that we've had over the last year with COVID and some of the revenue losses that we have moving forward in both taxes and parking fees and things that we don't normally see. And so that's going to impact us heavily. We're looking very hard right now at utilizing community safety initiative money to build and fund this program for at least the next 7 years. And ideally, we can utilize that money to put this program into place. And that, that'll be a piece that's going to come away from some of the way that we reimagine how we're policing right now. And I don't think there's anybody in the world that could argue the fact that having additional victim support at the time of arrests to really help our victims and provide them, we think of housing alternatives, to talk about the cycle of violence, to stop the cycle of violence immediately, to talk about restraining orders and those type of things that can help us in place, super valuable. So to circle back around, that's where we're going. At this point, I don't know that the commission can help us beyond, at this point, first of all, communicating, say something, need something, or see something, say something. But more importantly, just the support moving forward, because there's going to be a lot of different competing demands on that community safety initiative funding. And this is one of the ones that we look at as pretty critical. And so, the support of the commission is huge for us in trying to move this forward. So hopefully that answered your question. I would like to be a little bit more definitive, but absent the ability to either impact our general fund budget, which we cannot right now, or reallocate money from somewhere else in the organization, which we also cannot do right now. We're kind of in a position where we are reliant upon either grant funding, which doesn't re-up until 2023, or we utilize some community safety initiative funding.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I can see
Commissioner Shivers has his hand raised.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, I'd like to just go off of that. There were a series of public hearings on the Community Safety Initiative not very long ago. And because the commission had changed so drastically since we advocated for the Community Safety Initiative to City Council, I spoke merely as a citizen of Eugene. However, I think it is very important for the commission to take a stance in favor of the Community Safety Initiative and the proposed allocation of funding. After my comments received, and during my comments, received quite a lot of backlash from the community. However, when I took the time to explain what was actually in the Community Safety Initiative and what the numbers meant and why it was important, many of those folks had a greater understanding and were not as emotionally upset with the idea of giving the police more funding, despite the national conversation moving away from that direction. So I think it is important for us to take a stance in that direction.
Any more questions? All right, thank you, Captain Adams, for your time, and thank you for your work, your continued work. Domestic violence is not going to go away, and we can't have another 33% spike. So that we need to definitely keep our eye on that. Next we have our police auditor annual report. We have interim police auditor Leah Pitcher. Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I have a little PowerPoint presentation for you all, but I think that Jeremy also included the report in your materials. So I prefer more of an informal thing. So if you have questions, do the little raising hand thing, and we can make it more of a conversation than a presentation. But let me go get right. Actually, well, yeah, I'll get right to it. Sorry. So I have come here, every year I come to Police Commission to present our annual report, and I very much appreciate you all inviting me. I think the collaboration between all of the pillars of community oversight in Eugene is really important to the continued functioning of all of our pillars and of our community oversight system. I'm here at most meetings. If you guys ever have questions on what we're doing or what's going on, I'm happy to answer those. Even if I might be, have my video off, I'm typically here. And Jeremy is very quick to make me a panelist. So just know that happens like fast. So annual report overview. So as you all know, there's 3 pillars of community oversight in Eugene. There's you all who look at police policy and have community input into police policy. There's our office, which is staffed by full-time independent civilian employees, and we handle all complaints that come in about EPD employees. Also staff the Civilian Review Board, which is the 3rd pillar. CRB reviews our work and the work of internal affairs. So as you see, like internal affairs makes their report, we make our report, the CRB makes an annual report. All of these are based on the same numbers and the same database. We literally share a database with internal affairs. So when Cindy comes up later, we are working from the same database, we're working from the same numbers. And we talk a lot about all of the complaints that have come in. I actually sat with Captain Adams and Cindy earlier today for a solid hour and a half talking about the complaints that we're going through right now. So we communicate a lot. We have a collaborative approach to getting through all of these, and I think that is the most efficient, and I found it to be a successful way to deal with all these, to handle appropriately all the community complaints that we get. So with that introduction, the overview, our annual report is sort of divided into 3 main sections. One focuses on our 2020 accomplishments, one focuses on our areas of focus for the coming years, and one is on our statistics from the last year. So in 2020, our big, huge accomplishment was the community impact case investigation and review. That was the largest investigation our office has ever undertaken. It was a lot of work. It was over 600 hours of body worn video, in-car video from one weekend, that last weekend in May, and as well as use of force reports, police reports, community complaints, community recordings, you name it, we looked at it. We provided it all to the CRB, and it was the substantial portion of that case was reviewed at the CRB's December meeting, which is available online. We also take part in deadly force investigations, not the IDFIT criminal portion of that investigation, but the administrative portion that follows. We can definitely talk more about that. We helped with the ad hoc committee on police policy. So I say we were helping with support on that. I made videos to try to talk about our system and what we have in place, just so we could give people that background. We also provide staff support for the CRB and do community outreach, which is obviously a different look in 2020 than it had been before. Our areas of focus in the coming years, accessibility, and I'll talk more about all of these because I have another slide and a whole another section of the report on all of these. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We definitely are working on improvement on the administrative portion of deadly force investigations. I'm working with Sarah Maderi and Judge Gill from the Municipal Court right now on recommendations of the ad hoc committee on police policy. We've been working on an early intervention system that kind of got put on the back burner, at least from my perspective, last year when everything else was going on. I know Cindy and I need to talk more about that. And we have ongoing COVID-related challenges and ongoing personnel changes that are still going to be a big area of focus in the next few years. And then, yes, our statistics. So, progress results from last year. Like I said, the community impact case was huge. We got significant staff support from EPD on that. There was, like I said, a collaborative approach. I think we all agree that that's going to be the best way to get through that, and especially with that many hours of video that we had there. And the CRB contributes an enormous amount of volunteer labor. I have to commend every member of the CRB for all the work that they do, because they spend a lot of time on homework every month, and I'm very grateful for that thoughtful consideration of the materials that we provide them. The final portion of that case was reviewed by the CRB in June 2020. I think it might have been May, actually, Michael. I can't see you, Michael. You're not on my little thing, but anyway, sorry. We finished it up recently, and I'm working on a community impact case report that we'll put out this month that just really ties all up everything that we received and how we investigated it and how all of those investigations turned out. So that'll be on the website this month.
I'm sorry, Leah, you're right. I wasn't sure, and I thought it was someone who would correct me if I was wrong.
Yeah, no, thank you. I know June was a hard meeting, so I think yeah. Speaking of which, there were 3 deadly force incidents in 2020, and then there was one more use of force that was initially designated for review by a use of force board. So they are just categorized differently in the IA system. Let's see, none of those resulted in fatalities. Cindy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. There were 2 injuries, and one where nobody was injured. The board has met to discuss 2 of those incidents. One was reclassified, and one we are going to meet in August. We also worked, like I said, support for community meetings. So that was the ad hoc committee on police policy and supporting the CRB through a whole lot of work last year. They did the community impact case. They did an additional 9 investigations into allegations of misconduct, which are sort of the most serious allegations investigated by IA and our office. They come up with an investigative report, and it's a big deal. And then 3 incident reviews, which are sort of smaller scale investigations. And we also supported 2 CRB subcommittees on bylaws and meeting process. Community outreach. Beatrice is in the audience, and so if you have questions on this, she can help with those. She is our community outreach and translation specialist, community engagement and translation specialist. Sorry, Beatrice. It's a long title. And she had to really work to pivot how we do our outreach in 2020, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And Beatrice, oh, Sean, I see you have a question. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to ask Beatrice to go into more detail about how that pivot was made. I know from my work that it was very, very difficult. And obviously walk-ins took a huge dive, but the better Beatrice does her job, the more complaints you get each time. So it makes sense to me that you're hiring this time around. I've said before that I've been trying to look for ways to give you more money, but.
Thank you. Well, I think Beatrice, I think Jeremy, I think she's an attendee. If you want to go ahead and, can you promote her, Jeremy?
I absolutely can do that.
Thank you.
She has been promoted to panelist.
Excellent. Okay. Let me give her a moment to prepare.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I know in the past, like for the Asian celebration, we had a great deal of productive collaboration as well. So for all the commissioners who weren't there before, I plan on attending future meetings and outreach events with you guys as well.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think I'm unmuted, yes. So Sean, to answer your question, it was, thinking back to 2020, it really was difficult to pivot everything that we did regarding outreach. Really, my main focus during those first few months that COVID hit was being the support person, one of the support people for the Emergency Operations Center. And really outreach for our office sort of took a back seat because it was so important that people, especially I focus mostly on doing translation work for our Spanish speaking community so that they received the important COVID info that was coming out that was very time sensitive, as well as, the holiday farm fire and during May, the curfew information that happened during the protests and updates on what was going on during those days as well. So really it goes to show that even the community pivoted to how they contacted our office because our main doors were closed, but we didn't see a substantial drop in the number of complaints that we received last year. So that shows that the community was very engaged and knew about what we did. That's not to say that there's not more work to do to continue informing the community about the differences between what we can and can't do in our office. So moving forward, we've collaborated in the past, and I'm very interested in continuing to do that with Police Commission whenever we can share a table or a booth in these huge community events like Pride in the Park, the Asian celebration, all of these places where we can go together and explain to the community the differences between the different pillars of oversight and involvement regarding these topics. It's always a good conversation to have together so that people can see the differences between what we do. So I'm looking forward to that in 2022 because we're 2021 now.
Thank you for your work, Beatrice.
Thank you.
She is awesome. And I should say I think I have this in here, but we are working on trying to bring back the public safety forums in spring of 2022, barring disaster. It's just a side note. I have to share with you all that it was trying to sum up 2020 in a report was wild. It was just ridiculous. I mean, I know we all lived through it, but yeah, it was a lot. I found myself when I was writing the report, just sort of, it was helpful for processing. I don't know, maybe we should all write an annual report on what happened last year, but by the time I got to the fires, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. So goals and challenges. We have ongoing goals and challenges moving forward. So a lot of these we're already working on. So accessibility, we're already working with ISD to update our website. So there's a community portal so people can check on the status of their complaints. We can give them correspondence through an online system that is secure and confidential. But often a lot of the people who we work with, they have changing addresses, they don't have consistent addresses, they don't have consistent phone numbers, but they can access the internet at various service stations around the community. So we're hoping to do that so we can have improved correspondence with the people who we serve. We're also working on, well, I guess that's for the CRB. Never mind. Sorry, I keep bothering ISD with my whole mental list of changes and upgrades. So they're all in my head, and I apologize for that. But and then also working on continued regular updates on our more newsworthy or I wouldn't say newsworthy, but our more community, our cases of community interest, I guess. We're also working a lot on diversity, equity, inclusion. Beatrice is continuing outreach and establishing trust and meaningful community relationships. We're also looking to establish a DEI officer position who would be housed in the auditor's office, but with full access to EPD to analyze and report on DEI trends at the department. So everything from hiring and training to disciplinary processes, but looking at all those processes through an equity lens, but with sort of the cushion of being employed by our office and reporting up. Instead of reporting to the city manager system, we report directly to council. So we're a little bit insulated, but we're looking to have a good collaborative approach on solutions for all those issues. And for that matter, looking at issues in our office and in our complaint process and seeing what we can improve there. Deadly force investigations, continue to advocate for improvement to the EdFit system. I know you all are aware. I've come to talk to you, Mark's come to talk to you about our concerns with the EdFit system. And I think we can continue to advocate for improvement there. We can also on our end, and we are working with EPD staff to ensure that the administrative portion that follows the EdFit is a thorough presentation sort of what happened, or a thorough investigation into what actually happened and actually answers the community's questions that we have, because EdFit just doesn't do a good job of answering those questions. So we also are working, like I said, working with Sarah Majeri and Judge Gill on the recommendations of the ad hoc committee, continue to try to strengthen the city's role as a leader in community oversight. I actually got a news story right before this meeting, how Berkeley is changing their community oversight system to one that looks a lot more like ours, actually. They're going to have a fully staffed independent auditor's office that reports to council, and then they kind of merge their police commission and CRB a little bit. But I like our system better. But just saying, it's always interesting to me that I think we have improvements to be made for sure, but Eugene also is pretty far ahead of the curve in this area. COVID related challenges. We are still working on how to do our community engagement when we are not supposed to see each other as a community. And we're looking forward to that changing. Like I said, public safety forums will be coming back. Personnel changes. I am the interim auditor, as you probably all noticed. Mark Gissner retired at the end of February. We are working on hiring associate auditors to support me while I'm interim auditor, and then sort of see what happens. And then, like I said, also bringing on a DEI officer. So we have some team building to do, which is an interesting time to do it, but we're getting there. And there are statistics. So we got 407 complaints in 2020. It was a less than 9% decrease, and our complaints in 2019 were an all-time high, like by far all-time high. So like Beatrice said, it didn't seem like a significant decrease at all, despite not having walk-in traffic last year. Well, for a significant portion of the year, I guess. Allegations of misconduct increased by about 15%. Incident reviews increased. And walk-ins, like I said, dropped from 14% of our complaints to 3%. But our email complaints increased in about the same proportion. Oh, Sean, is that a new question, or is your hand still up from before? New question? Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it's a new question. I know a lot of complaints are dismissed before investigation because they don't apply to EPD. You know, incident happened in Springfield, or it's a private security company. I was wondering if there was any record of where those complaints are coming from.
That's a good question. So all of the complaints, even if they end up getting dismissed, they get included in the back of our report in the appendices. We include everything, even if it didn't go anywhere. So I haven't done enough, any answer I give you will be anecdotal, not statistical, if that makes sense. We've definitely, Springfield PD is one who we forward complaints to a lot. Lane County is someone who we forward complaints to a lot often because the complaints are about the jail. So maybe EPD did the arrest, but they were housed at the jail. They have complaints about both parts. And then we do get some about U of O PD as well. And our practice is to, every complaint we get, we do a preliminary investigation to see what we can find out about it. And if we find out that EPD wasn't involved, we forward it to that, or at least we give them contact information for that department. None of the other local agencies have a civilian oversight office. So typically we're sending people to internal affairs at those agencies.
Yes, and I think I already knew that. I would love to see the statistic analysis of that as well, because I know, from just the PR side, there's a frustration when these complaints disappear into nowhere. And also, I think it'd be very helpful to be able to explain to folks like, yeah, we got these complaints and here's where we need to focus our attention on fixing the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely see your point on that. And it could be, helpful for members who want a system like ours, right? To know that it would be used. So yeah, we have a generalized increasing trend in complaints. Our average over the last 10 years is about 380. Again, anecdotally, we're about on track for that this year. So right now we're on track for a little less than 400, but we'll see what happens. I am not making any predictions, people, not after last year. So this is where it gets a little sticky and sort of in the weeds, but we do our best. So there are 33 allegations of misconduct, and those are sort of cases that were classified as an allegation of misconduct, so like requiring a serious investigation. 3 allegations of criminal conduct. In those cases can all include more than one allegation against potentially more than one employee. So I piece it out into there are 71 specific allegations against 34 EPD employees. I think these numbers are slightly different than Cindy's, and that's because I included the criminal conduct in that 71, and I think she did not, because IA doesn't do those investigations. So if you have questions, I'm going to stay for the whole meeting. So if you have questions about how our reports mix, I'm happy to answer those. But I took a glance at hers and I saw that was different. I think that's why. Because like I said, we're using the same database. And then 21 of 33 of those investigations resulted in 1 or more sustained allegations against 1 or more employees. So it's a pretty high sustained rate. And then 21 employees were found to have committed those 33 sustained allegations. Why are those are all the same number, which confuses me, but I think it's right. We can come back to that if that's a problem. And incident reviews, inquiries. So you can see we did decrease a bit from 2019 down to 2020. But these are all the complaints that don't require an entire internal affairs investigation. So an incident review is investigated by internal affairs, and then if there's no policy violations found, it stays in incident review and it gets closed out. Inquiry is generally handled by the employee's immediate supervisor, as are service complaints, and then policy complaints are typically handled by the policy sergeant, so the person who's in meetings with you every month. I had another thought which I completely forgot and I apologize for, but such is my life these days. I'm sure it'll come back to me, but those are my statistics. That is the report. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your faces. And if anyone has questions, you are more than welcome to ask.
Do we have any questions?
See Sean's hand again.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, so I had a couple of questions. The first one was, of those 33 sustained complaints, how many of them was there disagreement between the auditor's office and the department or the chief?
That's a very good question. So the sustained, like those sustained ones that I report are ones that the chief sustained. So those would all be ones where typically if the chief has sustained it, both me and the chain of command, but typically I have recommended that. I'll just say that. So I actually am not sure. I'd have to go through, because typically if there's a disagreement, it's one that we'll take to the CRB. So I can go through the CRB report and try to get those numbers for you all. It is not frequent, I would say. Like it's pretty rare. And I know there was one in the community impact case where the auditor disagreed with the chief. And that's the only one. There might be one more actually from last year, one or two more. Michael might remember more than me too, but yeah, I can try to run those numbers for you. Is the shorter way to put that.
Lovely.
All right, we have Commissioner Wynn.
Thank you. So Leah, I've seen your chart that you just showed, and it looks like 2020 has fewer complaints than 2019. And I know that right now we're more than halfway past 2021 into 2021. I mean, are you starting to chart the complaint, and are you seeing, based on last year's July stats and then this year's July stat, are you seeing any trend that you can maybe share with us?
Yeah, I would say this time last year compared to this time this year last year is a slightly lower number than last year. So I think it is possible that we're seeing a sort of cumulative effect of no walk-in complaints. I will also say that last year summer was so unusual. I've never had a summer as busy as last summer in the auditor's office. And again, this is anecdotal. I haven't run the month-to-month numbers against the years. I can do that. But sort of April and beginning of May of last year were super low numbers of complaints. It was quiet. It was very quiet. And then May happened, and just the rest of the year was intense. It was just intense. It was a lot. And this year, I would say it feels like the beginning of the year, we were at that same high rate. We were all pretty stressed. And then things have kind of eased up a bit, but I am just, summer is always hard to predict. We've had summers where we get just enormously busy, and then we've had summers where it seems like everyone leaves town. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to Commissioner Shivers.
Yes, thank you. So my second question was that I had heard that there was some talk about creating a disciplinary matrix. I was wondering if your thoughts on that in general, of having a matrix for the community to review.
Yeah. Well, first, let me preface by saying that the ordinance specifically says that the auditor will not comment on disciplinary decisions. So under the current system as it stands now, our participation in the IA system ends at the adjudication. And then there's a whole separate disciplinary process that happens. So officially, I don't have input. My opinion as someone in this field is I am pro disciplinary matrix. I think there are some places that I think maybe don't get it quite right. I think there are similar issues, frankly, to like minimum sentencing laws, right? I think disciplinary matrix is a great idea. It also needs to be able to fit a myriad of different situations. I've been doing this for 11 years, and I still get complaints that I would never have predicted ever. They're just, it keeps me on my toes. So I think that whatever disciplinary matrix is successful is one that can adapt to a lot of different situations, mitigating circumstances, aggravating circumstances. I know Tucson had one that Mark and I were big fans of for a long time. In general, I think it's good for employees to know what might be coming down the pike. And I think it's good for the community to have input. It's good for the community to have buy-in.
And would you see the community input coming from the CRB or the police commission?
Right. Well, I think it's one of the neat things about our system is that it could come from both. I mean, I think officially this is a police commission, you know, in my opinion, that it would be police commission commenting on policy, right? However, CRB also, because we don't take part in the disciplinary system, CRB doesn't get, that's the one part of the file that they don't get, the disciplinary action. That is the only thing we redact. So they don't know what the discipline is, but they also have a really unique perspective, being the only 7 people who actually see the internal affairs investigations. So I think that's a place where input from both groups would be helpful. In my personal opinion, not from the auditor's office. Sorry.
Excuse me. And I know that's your personal opinion. Here's my question. When you said that there's information that you do not get, there's information that you do not get.
No, sorry, I misspoke. If that's what I said, I apologize. So I am not allowed to have input into disciplinary decisions, but I see what happens. It's all in the same database. So I know what discipline results, but I am not allowed to offer like a recommendation of the chief on what discipline I think should result. Does that make sense?
Correct. And my only backup question is, then how would we have that ability to do that if you were not given that ability?
Right, exactly. I think that's a very good question. I am allowed to report on trends. So in the report you see, I say the discipline that resulted from all of the allegations as a whole. So then that information is available to you too. But you are correct that the police commission not having access to the internal affairs investigations, you don't see specifically how those are looked at. And
correct. So I would almost prefer to piggyback on whatever trends you see, because sure. This commission is not getting the data that you're privy to. Hence, you do a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But the work is in your corner, not this commission's corner. Hence, that's where I want to make sure we really laser focus on the things that we can put our hand to. It's almost like taking a circle and saying this is within the level of things that we can do, because that sounds to me, the chair, that doesn't sound like that's anything that's within our realm. Am I wrong, Captain Adams?
No, Dallas, I think you're spot on. And if I could just offer a couple comments to contrast Leah, I don't mean to do that, but some things here that I think should be brought out and put into consideration. And by no means in anything I'm saying here is that this agency or the chief would be resistant to a discipline matrix of some. But one of the concerns with a discipline matrix is you can have officers that do the same violation. And so we're going to apply a matrix to these officers because we want to have things standardized. However, the nature of the contact, and just so let's say an officer is contacted in a criminal investigation and they are not professional in that contact with another law enforcement agency, versus an officer has contact in a criminal investigation and maybe it's even a traffic stop for speeding or something, insert whatever the example would be. My point being is you have to take in the context of the professionalism of the officer at the time of contact. And if you apply a rigid matrix to something like that, then we're going to lose some of those pieces in there. And the Laudermill hearings, the due process hearings that would come later on are specifically designed for an officer to raise mitigating factors, which would seem to fly in contrast to what we would consider a discipline matrix. So I think Leah hit it right on the point. If we could develop a matrix of some kind that would include those pieces, I think we're on the right path. But I will tell everybody in the commission, and we discussed this morning in a captain's meeting, we're in a lot of ways already applying a matrix because we will evaluate officers' conduct under similar circumstances. And then, for lack of a better term, there may be enhancers. I mean, if you're a jerk at the time of contact, and you're not professional, that amplifies the incident versus if you're contacted and you're professional and forthcoming and let's say not dishonest, then of course, you know, that mitigates. So there's some different factors in here. This is a very, very complex subject that if you watch what's happening nationwide with law enforcement, I think we would be blind to think that this is not some way, shape, or fashion ultimately going to be legislated to some degree. But just those are the pieces for the commission to be aware of, because there is some aspects of this that are on the face of it, it looks great, but once you dig into it, it's quite a bit more challenging.
Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you, Dallas. The police commission needs to focus on what we can actually change and affect. However, what I heard about the disciplinary matrix is twofold. One, it is a compromise as opposed to having the civilian review board legislate discipline as well. And the matrix would keep the final decision in chief's hands. And the matrix itself would go into the policy manual, which is why it might come under our purview as reviewing that policy manual. So it's just, you know, it's just down the pike. I figured while we had Leah here, I should ask and make everybody aware of both the complexity and the potential upcoming complexity that we might have to deal with.
And that's
So
a great, that's a great question. Anyone else?
If I may,
Yes.
one thing, thank you. I also want to stress that that is sort of my opinion based on my history and my experience in this office. And to the extent that the ad hoc committee recommendations are different, I am open and I am looking at those, and I am not in a deciding position on those recommendations, but just, I guess what I'm trying to say is that my historical view based on my personal experience is not the official position of the office, and it's not one that I'm married to. I hope that helps.
Do we have any more questions? Okay. Next, we have the Office of Professional Standards Annual Report. Welcome, Cindy Coleman.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Can you hear me okay? I have been asked to share the annual report, and I will, if you bear with me, I will share my screen here and see if that is working for you. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
I'm going to try to move it to a different screen here. All right. Just to go back, we've had a little bit of staffing changes in the office this year. And so in 2020, we had both Sergeant Jason Barrett, who you're familiar with, as well as Sergeant Kyle Williams, who's you're familiar with in terms of the professional standards sergeant who worked with you on policy. Because of the community impact case and the staffing requirements that we were dealing with, Sergeant Ryan Nelson came and joined us to help us with the investigations specifically related to the community impact cases last year. And then he has now switched over to become the IA sergeant. So that's why we really had all three of those sergeants working with us in the year 2020, working on IA cases. We have Rick Weber in our office and myself. This is just an overview of the contents of the annual report from this year. I've expanded it a little bit this year to include a couple of other areas, including a little bit more information on our police training unit, as well as put some information in there about force investigations and respectful work environment investigations. Let me move this. Pardon me while I adjust this. This is an overview of the statistics from 2018 to 20 on all of the investigations, the incident reviews, supervisor actions, and commendations. And I should say, if anybody has any questions along the way, if you can raise your hand, and Jeremy, if I miss it, if you could help me out and let me know.
Happy to do so.
Thank you. This slide shows the averages over the last 10 years for all of those areas. As you can see, we're 2020, we're right on average for the last 10 years at 36 complaints. We had 31 incident reviews this year, which is a little bit more, but that's from my perspective, that's a great thing. I'll talk a little bit more about incident reviews later in the presentation. Service complaints, policy complaints, and inquiries. We had 335, which is a little down from last year, but again, right on par for the 10-year average. And commendations, we had 456, which is an increase. So Leah has already talked about the different kinds of investigations that we have, but when you're looking at the stats, I think it's important for you to be reminded of the different investigative types. So the internal affairs investigations include allegations of misconduct as well as allegations of criminal misconduct.
Excuse me, Commissioner Dominguez has a question.
Okay.
How do commendations get tallied? I mean, where do they come from?
Commendations are received both from citizens as well as internal commendations. And they are in our database as well. I'm sorry.
Sorry, how do people submit the commendations?
They can be received in a number of ways. They could be anything from an email to a thank you card that is mailed directly to the officer, as well as some come in through the auditor's office, but we'll take them from any source that we can.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So this slide represents the allegations of misconduct, which include those criminal allegations of misconduct. So that 36 altogether. And you can see that most of the cases were classified by the auditor's office as use of force. Of those 36 cases, 22 of them were sustained. So again, and Leah did mention it, and I do apologize, some of the information that you're going to see tonight is a little bit repetitive because we are reporting on the same data. But so I'll try to kind of go through these pretty quickly and we can get to any questions you have. But each allegation of misconduct is subclassified by the auditor. And then each of those are, if any of those allegations in that case are sustained, it's going to be considered a sustained complaint and would show up in the statistic of that 22 for last year. So those 36 cases had a total of, my number showed 69 individual allegations that were investigated and adjudicated. And so this is where you get that 33 sustained individual allegations. So this is a demonstration, or it shows you by that general subclassification type what the adjudications were. So for example, in 2020, we had 17 individual use of force allegations that were within policy and 8 that were sustained. And you can see we had most of our sustained cases were performance-based. I put this slide in to go a little bit of a deeper dive to show which specific policy violations were cited in these cases. And so these citations can be found in our policy manual. You could look them up and see specifically what the policy language is on those. And again, we had several use of force cases, and whoops, sorry about that. And this is how our performance allegations were adjudicated.
So is that people didn't de-escalate very well?
Excuse me?
Sorry, so 820 de-escalation, there's 3 that right there. That means that the officers didn't know how to de-escalate situations?
Yes, so that was, sorry, I'm moving this just so I can see the screen. Yes, in this case, the specific policy of 820 de-escalation was cited during the investigation, and 3 of those were, again, I'm trying to see the screen. 3 of those were sustained and 3 were within policy.
I don't know if you're able to go into it, and it's okay if you can't. So that literally means that the officers didn't use whatever de-escalation skills they supposedly get in order to de-escalate a situation, right?
Yes, that means that it was determined that the officers did in fact violate our policy and did not meet our expectations in that specific case.
Thank you.
This shows our sustained complaint rates. So in 2020, we had 22 internally generated allegations and 14 external citizen complaints. And it just shows the sustained rates for those. So 13 of the 22 internal complaints were sustained and 9 of the 14 external complaints were sustained.
All right, I have another question about that. Can you go back, please?
Okay, sure.
Thank you. So you're saying internal being within the police department itself?
That's right. So that could show up in a lot of different ways. That could be anything from a use of force being reviewed through our chain of command and having it flagged as it being an outside policy, or looking to be like it might not be within policy. So we could identify it that way. It could be a first line supervisor becoming aware of a concern, or it could be even another employee, a peer. So it just means that it was not brought forward by a citizen or initiated by the police auditor.
We have one more question, Commissioner Shivers.
We do.
Yeah, so I know Leah mentioned the proactive identification of officers who might need more corrective action to ensure proper service. I was wondering, you mentioned at the beginning of this that a use of force might be flagged by the system in some way. Are those two ideas related at all?
Well, but what I mean by the use of force, as you may have heard, we have a companion software system called Blue Team that we use when a reportable use of force occurs. And when that happens, we have an automatic protocol that's reviewed by the sergeant, the lieutenant, and the captain. Meanwhile, we're copying that to our defensive tactics supervisor, as well as the auditor's office and internal affairs, all has visibility to those reportable uses of force. And so at any point in that review process, a supervisor could, or the auditor's office could say, hey, I think this use of force incident may be outside policy, and we want to have an IA investigation to take a closer look. And that would be an example of an internally generated IA investigation.
So that's not what Leah was talking about before with a proactive data analytics.
I'm not sure exactly what she was referring to, but I don't think it's what she was talking about before.
That's correct. It's not what I was talking about before.
Okay,
Thank you.
Commissioner, excuse me, Commissioner Wynn?
Thank you. So Cindy, I'm wondering, are there ever any circumstances that a complaint is submitted or generated internally as well as externally for the same particular incident? And, you know, if that happens, which way do you go? I mean, do you put it into the red or the blue?
If that were to happen, I would put it in as an external complaint, a citizen generated complaint.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.
I have another question, if nobody else
Okay.
has a question. And would you mind going back to that last one?
Not at all.
Thank you. Oh, I was just wondering, of those internal complaints, it seems like a good portion of them are, you know, usually, I mean, of complaints in general, the internal ones seem to be greater. And I'm just wondering, how much of that is like are those, I guess I don't really see, there is no way for me to tell what the complaints entail. And I guess I'm just wondering, is that something that we should be concerned about, that like within the culture of the EPD, like what it is that the complaints are? It sounds like what you were saying is that some of them are positive, where it's just like people going, you know, that wasn't really, pardon my whatever, kosher, that wasn't really kosher. So I guess I'm wondering, like, is it like people having issues with each other? And additionally, in addition to what you were saying, like this just didn't seem very kosher to us. So
Hey, Cindy, can I answer one?
Of course.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you know, Bonnie, very good point. And outwardly, when you look at it, you would think this potentially could be something where we have internal conflict. However, one of the expectations for all our officers, in particular our supervisors, is to look for forms of either training or areas where we could be better, and certainly look for areas of misconduct. And we're going to see this increase, you know, and this is just me speculating, but I'm pretty sure I'm good on this one. We're going to see an increase in this because the awareness that we now see about, I mean, throughout my 27-year career, we've always talked about, you know, see something, say something again. I keep saying that today, but you know, officers reporting on other officers, but it's become very, very prevalent and mainstream now. And throughout my career, it's escalated. So one of the things we see here is a byproduct of not only are we watching for misconduct and are we reporting for misconduct, and that will continue, but we're also looking for trends that we can improve upon if we have a service complaint or otherwise. And the other thing that's going to happen here, and why I speculate that we'll have additional, more internal reported events, is we have a very, very young police force. And unfortunately, we can provide all the training and supervision in the world that we can. But at the end of the day, we're not hiring perfect robots. We're hiring people and they make mistakes. And especially when our officers have less tenure, they're more inclined to make mistakes, which is going to lead to more reported internal investigations. So I will tell you from an executive level, when I see more reporting internally as opposed to externally, I'm actually more pleased with that, because I believe personally that we're doing a better job of policing ourselves and making sure we're upholding the standards of service. So hopefully that provides a little clarity on why you see those numbers the way they are.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I now appreciate that the red is bigger, and I hope to see it be bigger, I guess, sort of. What I'm wondering is, so we like in this, I don't know if there's another graph that actually shows us the actual incidents. So are you yourselves keeping track of the trends of the things that are being reported?
Yeah, through the database, that is That is where we track all the data related to IA complaints. Yes,
Which is something that I don't have access to, right?
correct. The auditor's office does too. So this is a shared database between the auditor's office and internal affairs. And that's it. It's locked down to the rest of the department.
And then is there any way that we can get, not necessarily, we can't get that information specifically, and I'm actually not understanding why it is that we don't know the trends that you all are complaining about. Complaining sounds so bad, but reporting on. No, yeah, complaining, that's the word we're using there. So I guess what I'm wondering is, I mean, since we, as the police commission, oversee police policy and procedure, I guess I'm wondering if there's any way that we could be helping look at police policy and procedure, and with your knowledge, if you can just like give us like, oh, this is what people keep running into and they're and people are complaining. So how do we help?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we did add, and I don't know if this is getting at what you're talking about, but the annual report is the document that is published that in fact does have some data and shows some trends. But one thing that we've added to just the last couple of years was we've added some additional categories to help us track what we see as sort of emerging trends. And for example, just this year, we added driving related complaints because we were noticing we had a kind of what seemed like a little bit of a spike, but to be able to track it and know statistically how those kinds of things are comparing year to year rather than just that anecdotal stuff. Because otherwise, those are typically classified as an inquiry with not an official as a performance issue. So we can't get into the weeds unless we have used that category. So we're starting to use categories more. So hopefully that'll give us better information about emerging trends.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else at this time, or shall I move
No,
forward?
you can move on. You can move on.
Here's and the slide related to the actions that have been imposed over the last few years. So in 2020, we did have one employee resign during investigation, and 5 oral reprimands, 17 documented counselings, and 1 coaching were the outcomes associated with the 2020 IA cases.
I'm so sorry. I have another question.
Yeah.
Why is there only 1 coaching?
So for an IA case, it's actually uncommon for there to have it result in a coaching. If it's a significant enough case to be an allegation of misconduct and was sustained, you would typically see it land at least at a documented counseling. So you all were talking about disciplinary matrices just a few minutes ago. While we don't have a disciplinary matrix, we do, every time a case is sustained, the supervisor is working with the Employee Resource Center and with myself. So we're giving them the individual employees' IA history so that they can see if they've had any recent sustained discipline of a similar nature, as well as they can go look at comparables for other cases to make sure that the discipline that they're recommending to the chief is in alignment with what we've done in the past. And if it's not, in other words, if there's a mitigating circumstance or some aggravating circumstances, to articulate why that they think it should be different than where we have landed in the past with other employees, because we do want it to be as consistent and fair as possible. I believe this case, that coaching may have involved a mitigating circumstance with a new recruit that maybe hadn't had as much training and experience. And so a coaching was really the most appropriate corrective action in that case.
And then since we're here, can you speak a little bit to the documented counseling, please?
Yes, a documented counseling is typically in a situation where the employee may not, it's a sustained policy violation, but there could be a circumstance where maybe the employee wasn't either completely familiar with what the expectations were, but it is designed, it's pre-disciplinary, but it is designed to have a record to make sure that the employee now knows what the expectations were of them in that circumstance, and have that documented so that they know that, and we know that they've been counseled on that.
I have a question. I have a quick question. Under documented counseling, could that be something like the person showed up late for work?
It could be. It could be that kind of administrative thing, or it could be a violation of one of these other policies that we have. Well, it is. I mean, all of these numbers represent cases that were classified as allegations of misconduct.
Which showing up for late for work could be that.
So it could be a violation of a de-escalation policy. It could be a violation of our performance policy, or really any of our policies. But documented counseling is considered pre-disciplinary. Oral reprimand is our first level of discipline within the system at the city.
I have Commissioner Dominguez and then Commissioner Hui.
I think V was first. Sorry.
No, it was you.
Oh, it was? Okay, thank you. So the documented counseling, then that's not necessarily counseling, like real counseling. Like, I was talking to one of the officers and they said that the only reason that they would get counseling, like, like mental counseling, is if they were involved in a deadly force kind of thing. So this right here is completely different. Is that correct?
That's right. This is where a supervisor sits down with the employee. They talk about the behavior that was sustained, that was found to be in violation of policy, and they let them know what that is, and they deliver that in a memo to that employee. So the employee gets that in writing, that this policy was violated, this didn't meet our expectations, and this is what our expectations are in the future.
So is discipline ever actual counseling? Because I feel like with respect to some things, like if, for example, a officer keeps getting told that, you're not very respectful and you should, behave a little more professionally, I feel like that might entail or could use actual counseling, counseling.
It could certainly include what we would consider remedial training, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, great question. Counselor Wee.
Hi. So my question is, when you run into situations when policies are not being followed by the officers, do you think that it was because the officers don't understand the policies, or they just blatantly ignore it?
Well, those would be circumstances that would definitely be taken into account in the disciplinary recommendation. For example, people make mistakes. And so oftentimes it is just they either didn't fully understand the policy, or they understood the policy, but they messed up and they made a mistake. And so that could result in a documented counseling. Did that answer?
My question, Cindy, was, when you have an officer who violated a policy or didn't follow it, was reported by their supervisor or reported by the community, and you look into the into the situation, you investigated it, do you find that sometimes the officers knew the policy, but just didn't want to follow it? Or is it because they didn't know about the policy and couldn't follow it because they didn't know it, is what I'm asking.
Yes, I think that there are times when they didn't fully understand the policy. But that is, I guess what I was trying to get at is if we had an employee that willfully violated the policy, and that came out in the investigation, that might be an aggravating circumstance, which chain of command, including the chief, that might result in a higher level of discipline if there was that willful violation that was discovered through the investigation.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner.
Can I jump in just behind that
go
for
ahead.
a second?
Go ahead, Captain.
You know, we're built on, this organization's built on structure, and the policies and procedures are in place to ensure that, first of all, we're staying right on best practices for sure and staying lawful in what we're doing, but also to ensure that we're consistent in our actions. And I'll tell you, absolutely 100%, if we have an employee that willfully disregards a policy that is not going to be a document in counseling, that will be something greater, because that's one of the things that will erode public confidence in what we're doing when there's rules there that we're asking the community to abide by rules by and large, and then we're not abiding by our own. And so, you know, these are one of the things that when we look at procedural justice, for example, and having the ability to police our community, if we can't hold ourselves to that standard, then we can't expect others to. And so that is something that would not be a documented counseling. And I'm talking about a full-on willful, I knew the policy and no, I wasn't going to follow it. And that's not going to be looked upon favorably by this department command.
Thank you for your input. Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, so I would just like to, since officer mental health is on our list of priorities, I am very glad that therapy is not seen as a discipline. You know, I'm in therapy. I hope everybody is in therapy for dealing with the stresses of life. So yeah, thank you for the clarity on that, what documented counseling meant.
You bet.
Commissioner Dominguez.
Yes.
You had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So you were saying that that there are times that, is it very common that officers don't know the policy?
Well, the expectation is that officers know the policy. That's kind of the baseline. But at times there could be policy language that needs to be adjusted. Maybe it's not as clear as it should be. So that would be a mitigating circumstance. So each case is looked at differently, and all of those factors are taken into consideration not only in the adjudication phase, but in the corrective action phase.
Can we get like a flag or something from that? Like if that ever happens, can it just be like flagged and be like, this policy confused this officer? And can we know about that? That'd be great.
Well, what we do is we work very closely with the policy sergeant. I work with the policy sergeant, and those cases are in fact flagged directly to the policy sergeant to say, hey, we need to make that adjustment. So that would be on that sergeant's radar to make that change. So perhaps that would be a good way to get it to you guys, is to just add that as on things that they might be working on, things that have been identified. And then it also could come to you through the CRB for those cases that make it to the CRB, but not all of them are reviewed there. So I think the most streamlined way is to have the policy sergeant do that.
Oh, thank you. That's Nelson, right?
Yeah. Well, for now.
No, thank you.
Yep.
We'll have Commissioner Nguyen. Commissioner Nguyen, we can't hear you.
My apology. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cindy, I'm wondering if when you look at the trend are you seeing that, most of the complaints, as far as like violating policies is concerned, are they coming from as Chief Skinner would call them, baby cops, or are they coming from more seasoned officers?
Anecdotally, I'd say that we've had quite a few with newer officers, especially the ones that are classified by the auditor as like service level complaints and policy complaints, and even some incident reviews. So, but that does not mean that our more seasoned officers don't receive complaints, because they do. So I haven't run the stats on that, but anecdotally, I would think that we're getting quite a few from our newer officers with less experience.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Thank you. I hope this is my last question. We can move on to the next page. Anyway, so policy wise, do you see a trend? Who could inform us as to whether or not there's a trend of behavior that is getting complaints, but there is no policy that actually addresses, the things that are being complained about? Did I ask a question? I don't know, but yeah.
Can you give me an example of the kind of behavior that you're thinking of that wouldn't already be reported by one of those policy violations?
Well, I'm not sure. I think there might be one about driving. So I guess kind of using your example of like don't drive like a maniac because you're an officer. Set an example. Right. So I don't think that's in our policy. So like maybe that's something that just like, by the way, it's here. So don't do that.
Sure. So to me, that's the best example I can think of, because it's actually happening right now. So the way that those are coming in, they're classified by the auditor almost always as a service complaint performance, and assigned out to the first line supervisor. So they're not actually getting they're not going to be showing up here in these statistics for the allegations of misconduct. But when we use the category flag for driving related complaint, for example, we can start tracking that kind of what we see as an emerging trend. So over time, we should be able to see if that trend was just a blip, or if it is something that we really need to address in remedial driving training with officers for our training program. So I think the use of the categories might be the best way at getting at kind of specific categories of complaints that are coming in, because it's going to get lost in just a service complaint performance, because we're not attaching a policy violation to it per se. So I think the categories is the best way to do that. And we've just started doing that this last year. So
who do we, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to ask this. Who do we work with to, get to that kind of info?
Well, we are, I've included in this annual report for 2020. I am your person.
Okay, you're our person. Then
yep, I am your person.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Is it okay to move forward?
No, we have one more commissioner question.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Commissioner Wynn?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you happen to know, Cindy, how much time do trainees get to work on understanding the policies, during their trainings? I guess the police standards and training program. Do they get weeks? Do they get, days, or what do they get?
I really am not, I do not know the answer to that question, but I can find out and get back to you on that.
Okay.
I got you, Cindy. I got this one.
Oh, do you? Okay.
So, yeah, in total, our recruits are going to do, if they go through the program as they should without any slowdown, it's a total of 44 weeks and then maybe more. They'll be in-house training where we review policies and procedures. They'll go to the police academy where they're tested in Oregon law. Then they'll come back to us for 16 weeks of field training. And there's an entire manual that's filled with policies, procedures, and laws that are instructed one-on-one to our recruit officers by our field training officers. And ultimately, that's all checked off in a book, and there is some testing associated with it. The program is very robust, it's very robust in Eugene. And so we're doing everything we can to ensure that these policies and procedures are in fact understood by all our employees. Additionally, there's high liability or higher liability policies or procedures both that we want to hone in on. And those are, your pursuit driving, for example, your use of force. Those are two that just jump to the top of the list that I think we would all see as something that would be covered multiple times through different events throughout all the field training. So exact number of hours that we give our employees on just policy review would be very difficult to drill down to. But at best, it's 44 weeks of training for a brand new police officer to be solo on their own. Looks like Vash has some follow-up for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Captain. And I'm just wondering, I'm asking these questions because we can talk until the cows come home, but unless we understand what's the reason behind why, you have a handful of officers, right, that are chronic violators of policies, or they violated a few times while others don't, right? I'm wondering if it's because the policies are done in a way that is so wordy, so complex that, in order to memorize all that, I mean, when you're in action, it's hard to refer to the manual, so I think, that's worth considering, worth wondering, pondering on, because if we can simplify things or make it, however it needs to be for these officers to get it, you're still going to get some people who, some officers are going to ignore it, either they don't agree with it or they protest it in other ways. But, at least we try, right? At least we, make the attempt to make it understandable. If that happens, if you were to take our policies into a corporate environment, they would want their employees to understand it, so why don't we do the same with our policies, right? It's written almost in a way that is for lawyers, for people who really are able to spend so much time scrutinizing it and memorizing it. Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to raise that point. Thank you.
I have a quick, excuse me, I have a quick question. Commissioner Wynn, when you were asking your question, when you brought up because I'm a numbers guy, you said something about 5 officers doing this. Was this something you were giving some information, or you just using that as an example?
I'm just using that as an example.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. I was making sure.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking for clarification.
Yes. We have Captain Adams. Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. V, this is, the challenge of procedure. You guys know as well as I do that there's a real balance there between defining our rules and our lines and putting too much in there that's overwhelming our employees. At the end of the day, we really always have to remember that our policies and procedures are guidelines. Because sure as heck, as soon as we're doing something, we're going to get into something that's new and different and is not completely covered in policies and procedures. So more so than anything, this comes back to leadership and supervision and training and mentoring. And those big points are what reiterated through this agency. And the example I'll give you is if I go out to driving, so I'm going to get in a car and I'm going to simulate a pursuit and I'm going to practice my emergency driving. At the same time, there's an instructor in the seat there who's also asking me questions about what information do I need to put in the radio? What things do I need to be considering? So they're drilling down and hitting the points during training of those critical pieces to our policies and procedures. And in that regard, that's how we become better, is by continuing to reiterate those pieces at all times during our training, not only just our training, but our supervisors and our supervision in the field. When our supervisors are seeing things, particularly positive things, then it's, it really showing that leadership and positively reinforcing that. But coming back to the procedures, then talking through each one of those points. So again, hopefully, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but we really have to not lose sight of the fact that even though we're focused right now on policy and procedure, this really is leadership, mentoring, teaching, and coaching is what it comes down to. So, Navasha, I cut you off.
Yeah, Officer Tester.
Thank you. Captain hit the nail on the head with that one. I think it's really important to recognize that we're also being taught these things in our training. So if we go to, say, a defensive tactics training, one policy that I know for sure I'm going to end up seeing that day is going to be use of force. If we're doing taser training, I'm likely going to get a reminder from the use of force and also the taser policy and de-escalation. So those are all things that are tied into our trainings as well. And a lot of these, just kind of from the union standpoint, a lot of these policy violations are overt violations. We do have a good chunk of officers that totally own it. They commit the policy violation, and after the fact, they, take whatever discipline that they're going to have to get, knowing that they messed up. So there is that self-accountability as well.
Okay, you want to continue?
I would be happy to.
Yeah.
So incident reviews, I wanted to provide the group with just a little bit of a reminder what incident reviews are, because I think they've really been a great efficiency tool for both the auditor's office and the department. They are a preliminary investigation that's usually assigned to an IA sergeant to better understand what happened and give the auditor information to decide if it needs to be reclassed to an allegation of misconduct, or if questions are answered so that it can be closed out as an incident review. So we started these in 2016, and again, we believe, or I believe, that they've been a really great tool to better understand what happened without the need for a full IA investigation. And 2020 cases, 58% of them were performance-based.
Cindy?
Yes.
I had, during that last conversation, I had stopped your feed so that people could see each other's faces. Do you mind resharing the presentation? We've just for this last comment, I apologize for doing that. But, yeah.
Is it back?
Thank you. It is.
Very good. So again, this is just a slide that shows how the auditor classified those incident reviews. And we had 31 of them last year. So in other words, those we did have more than we did the previous year, but it just shows that the auditor's office used them more, and more were able to be closed out as incident reviews without needing a full IA investigation.
We had two questions. Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. So discrimination, is that like racism or something?
It could be anything to, it could be racial discrimination. It could be any kind of protected class discrimination.
I'm just wondering, and if I may, and you don't have to answer this. So is that, I guess, how does Beatriz, I don't know how, Beatriz, yes. How does she use this information? I guess I'm just wondering if she will address that. Because you do outreach. I don't know if she's listening.
Hi, Bonnie.
Who are you speaking to?
Ms. Otero?
Yes, so I do, in the outreach that I do try to, it's part of the community trust building, right? Just informing the community that our office is a neutral place where people can come to bring about these concerns if they do feel that they are discriminated against. So obviously that number is something that, I pay special attention to, because a lot of the events that I go to are for underrepresented communities, like monolingual Spanish speakers, undocumented people, all of the protected classes. So that is something that, and I always tell people, especially if they're hesitant to reach out regarding experiences regarding EPD, I let them know, even if you have questions about reporting an incident to EPD, because it can be very intimidating to even walk into EPD headquarters for some folks. So I make myself available whenever I can. I say, if you have trouble going in person or don't have access to the online reporting system, I give out my contact information, my direct line, and make myself available almost as a resource for EPD in a way. It's kind of weird because we're in a neutral office, but I do make myself available to those community members that need that extra support to either bring about a complaint or just report something to EPD, because it can be an intimidating process either way. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up with you at some other point, not during this meeting, but yes.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, so my question is, my understanding is that socioeconomic class is not part of those protected classes. Is that correct?
I don't think so. And I can't remember specifically of what these specific 2020 complaints were to advise, but again, this is just a general classification or subclassification that the auditor's office would classify this complaint with, just to help us better understand what types of complaints are being categorized in this investigative type.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Supervisor actions, these are complaints that have been classified by the auditor as either a service complaint, a policy complaint, or an inquiry. These complaints are typically investigated by the employee's immediate supervisor, with the exception of policy complaints. Most of those are going to our policy sergeant, or the alternative, sometimes we'll have a subject matter expert in a particular program area that we'll refer these to, because they'll be more on point to be able to address the complaint. And out of those investigative types, we had 43% that were classified as service complaints. This just shows a little bit of a comparative trending chart with respect to total numbers of the inquiries. We had a little bit of a decline this last year in inquiries. We had quite a few more policy complaints this year, and our service complaints dropped a little bit. Service complaints are categorized, subcategorized, I should say, and those 69% of them were classified as performance.
Sorry, may I ask a question?
Of course.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully it's not too long. Policy complaints, that's not, or is it people actually going, I don't like this policy?
It could be, yes.
Really?
It could absolutely be a situation where they, I'll use an example of, they were in a traffic crash with no injuries, and they are upset that officers didn't respond and take a police report, that kind of thing. So if if the complaint comes in and they're complaining about something that is not a policy violation and they just don't like our policy, or maybe they're confused about our policy and don't understand exactly why we have done something, that could be classified by the auditor as a policy complaint.
Okay, thank you.
In other words, as Leah mentioned, all complaints received by the auditor's office are going into our database, are being classified, and then some may be dismissed at intake for one reason or another, for example, outside jurisdiction, or but they're all in there. So that all of the complaints that are in there are being represented by these stats. Complaint categories. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but one of the things we noticed, probably mid last year, was we were getting some trending complaints of some new emerging trends that we had, one of which was COVID. We were getting complaints regarding wearing masks, for example. And so we added that as a category. We started tracking prohibited camping, and then additionally prohibited camping in parks. And then we also added a category for the riot protests complaints that came in. So last year we had 46 complaints that had something to do with the riots or the protests. And that could be anything from the police department didn't do enough, or the police department used excessive force in their arrest. So everything related to the protests and riots got that category flag. And one thing that we have been, that is not new, that we've been tracking for years, is our reporting to the state of the bias-based policing complaints. And so in 2020, we had 5 of those. And this year, I've added a new one, so you'll see it in next year's report, on driving complaints. And Lee and I are working together to, as things come up, we will consider adding new categories to help us if we see an emerging trend coming.
I have a question, Commissioner Wynn. I have a question for you, Cindy, from Commissioner Wynn.
Sure, I'm ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, when you have the graph with 46 riot protest complaints, I'm assuming that's the protesters complaining about the way police officers treated them, or is it the community complaining that there's nothing done?
Everything. So any complaint that was received, in addition to being classified and included in the statistics that both Lee and I've reported to you, we also added this additional flag to just help us understand how many complaints in total did we receive that had something to do with a riot or a protest in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And 46.
Okay,
they really did range from, you didn't do enough to protect my business. You did way too much, and you used excessive force, and everything in between.
All right, thank you.
That's what that represents.
Sorry, what is LECC?
That is law enforcement. Oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank on what that acronym stands for, but it is the agency with the state that we report these bias-based policing complaints to. I want to say it's Law Enforcement Contacts Committee.
It was Law Enforcement Coordinating Committee.
Okay. And that has been a requirement since, I think we started tracking for a partial year in 2016 and started a full year in 2017. So in 2020, we received a total of 5 complaints, and 2 of those were classified by the auditor as incident reviews and 3 as inquiries.
It seems like I'm glad that there aren't that many, but it seems like a very small amount. The only 5 complaints. What am I missing? Why do I feel like that's like a really small amount? I mean, I'm not wanting it to be bigger, but
No, it's I think it's a good sign, actually, that there's not that many. But just to maybe clarify or provide some perspective on this is that these complaints could be complaints that citizens come to the auditor's office with, or they could be a statement made by an arrestee. You only arrested me because of I'm Black, or you only stopped me because I'm Black. When a citizen makes that kind of an allegation, officers are required by policy to notify their sergeants. Sergeants are required to go and conduct an investigation and do an intake, or at least do an intake. And then if the citizen continues that they think that they were, that the decision to arrest them or take some action was biased, then they will do a blue team entry, and we will do, we'll put that in the system. The auditor classifies it and it's investigated. So they can come in, and again, any way that they come in, they're in, and then they get classified, and they have this additional tag or category flag so that we can make sure and not lose track of any that need to be reported.
oh, and so it sounds like you're saying that some of that is actually like some of the officers do self-report that somebody said that?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And it's on their body worn video. I mean, so yes, they have that information.
Cool.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I would say more in the last couple of years, that's probably more of them are coming in that way than through the auditor's office. That's, again, I don't have that stat, but that's what it seems like.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know we've been taking a lot of time on this, so maybe I'll go through this stuff a little quicker, but one of the things we also track in our database in professional standards, vehicle accidents. And what's important to know about this figure is it's not just vehicle crashes, but we track any kind of damage to our police vehicles, whether it's a crash, or it is a citizen throwing a rock at a police vehicle, or they're kicking out a window in the back of a patrol car, or really any damage that's caused to our vehicles. So not all of these are crashes, but you can see that we do have a fair number of circumstances where our vehicles are damaged. This just shows, for example, in patrol, we had 22 crashes or damage that was at fault of the employee, and 17 that were not at fault or within policy. And it kind of makes sense. Patrol's doing the most driving, that's where the most accidents are occurring. But we also have some incidents in investigations and op support. We had 1 cahoots accident last year and 1 volunteer accident as well. But to compare all that with how many miles that are being driven by our folks, it helps put that into a little bit of perspective. Vehicle pursuits. We had 5 in 2020. So it went up just a little bit. And these are the kinds of reasons that pursuits were initiated. One was a suspected Dewey. Couple were, they had probable cause. One was cited as reckless driving and one wanted subject. Use of force. Use of force numbers are kind of trending downward, and we had 118 different use of force incidents last year. 53% were listed by the supervisor that there was active resistance. 19 attempt to flee. 8%, I should say, was assault on an officer. Most of the incidents resulted in the arrest of the involved subject, 88% of them. Taser deployment decreased a little bit, 4%. The effectiveness decreased to 54%. And I did a little breakdown of the effectiveness. So 37 were considered effective, 25 were considered ineffective, and 6 were limited effectiveness.
So we have a question.
Yep.
Officer Teston.
Yes, Cindy, on the last slide, the 80-something% that was arrested there,
Yep.
does that also include POHs, police officer holds?
Yes, yes. So, well, I should back up and say this is all is reported by in the database by the sergeant that completed the intake. So in blue team. So no, I don't think it takes, I take that back. I don't think that this would include the police officer holds. I think that in this stat, I don't think the sergeant would select that.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Can you remind us what the officer hold is? Sorry.
Sure.
So police officer hold, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Police officer hold is when we can articulate that somebody is a danger to themselves or others. So when they're really, not necessarily needing to go to the jail, they need to get mental health help, we can send them on a police officer hold, and we actually transport them over to like the University District Hospital right there on campus. And they actually, I don't want to say lodge because that's not the right terminology, but we're able to put basically a mental hold on somebody because they're better suited to get the services that they need at the hospital versus being taken to jail.
Right. And I think the remaining percent there is oftentimes the reason someone isn't arrested may be that they are determined that they need some different assistance rather than charges. This just shows for our taser applications that we still have a fair percentage that were deemed effective. Just a little bit of information regarding our K-9 use of force. We had 8 in 2020, we had 11, and 10 were deemed effective and all were within policy.
We have a question for you, Commissioner Shiver.
I think mine is actually on the upcoming slide. It's in regard to the 94% drugs. So I will save it for a minute.
This one?
It's an upcoming slide.
Okay.
Of K-9s. It's on K-9s.
Got it. I think this is a typo here. Because we did have only 8 in 2020. not the 10 here. So that's a mistake on my part. I apologize for that. So this slide represents, this is not all the different force types that we have, but these were the 6 most common force types that were cited for over the last 3 years. And you can, it helps to kind of see that control holds have been working on a downward trend. Focus flows have sort of, you know, gone down, they've gone down a little, but they've kind of back up to where close to what 2018, where we had a pretty dramatic decrease in knee strikes, decrease in OC spray and takedowns, and tasers, a slight decrease. But one thing that's important that I've sort of noticed is that these numbers and these uses can be sort of fluid. So it's helpful to kind of watch over time how they develop. Arrest data. We had a pretty significant decrease in arrests last year, and the thought is that partly that was due to the pandemic, but I don't have any firm data on that, but it does seem like that probably contributed to the number of arrests going down. I don't know if Captain Adams has any words of wisdom on that.
Well, just anecdotally, I think we could all see that we had less contact, less activity, certainly due to the pandemic. So I think that's reflected in those numbers. I can tell you from the investigations world, in the investigations division, watching what our detectives are doing, we've not had a drop in what we're doing there. As a matter of fact, we've had an increase. And leading into this year already, when we're coming out of COVID restrictions, now some stuff is being reported that wasn't previously. So certainly that has an impact.
Can I have also Officer Tester add her 2 cents to that?
I would definitely concur and kind of just add that on the patrol side of things, as I worked patrol 2020, it was a lot of trying to figure out different solutions for various things. So whether that be, okay, yes, you should probably get cited in lieu in custody, so a citation instead of being taken to jail, or trying to find some other way to work with whoever, you know, suspect is, to avoid having to go to jail and be, you know, in a position with a bunch of other inmates. And yes, they're being tested, but at the same time, we don't want to put other people in that position either. So I would argue that COVID played a very large part in 2020 and the low arrest rate there.
But what I think is useful to understand is, compared to the arrests, how many reportable use of forces that the department engaged in. It's like 1%. It's not that common that we're using a reportable level of force with all the conflicts that we're having. This just is a quick look on the monthly average over the last few years of where our numbers are for use of force, complaints, and commendations. So use of force is trending downward, which is consistent with what we've seen. Complaints last year we had an average of 34 a month, and commendations, we had an average of 38 a month this last year. Bonnie, I think that you were the one asking about how do we get commendations, or where do we get them from? So this shows you that 35%, those are those internally generated commendations, which includes our annual department awards that are given. But it can also include just a supervisor recognizing extraordinary performance of an employee and wanting to process it as a commendation. The rest, the majority, are received from citizens. And so last year we had an equal percentage of email and US mail, and a pretty relatively low percentage of the walk-ins. And that was probably all from January 1 to like March 16th due to, again, the pandemic. One thing that the first 3 themes that you see there have remained consistent for as many years as I can remember. Their employees are being acknowledged for their compassion and their caring and their patience that they display, their professionalism. And but one thing that kind of stood out this year is we did get a number of complaints, or pardon me, we did get a number of complaints regarding the protests, but we also got a number of commendations from folks that really praised the department in how they felt supported and felt safe despite the chaos that was happening. So I just wanted to share that with this group too.
Councilor Zelinka, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was, so on that previous slide,
Yes.
does that mean that 2/3 of them are external?
Yes,
Okay, good.
exactly.
That's kind of impressive.
Yeah. Lessons learned. So for every complaint that we get, and the vehicle crashes that are at fault, and for all the things that kind of come through our office, we are tracking performance issues that are identified, training issues that are identified, policy adjustments that need to be made, and we're passing those on to either our DT supervisor so that that can be incorporated into defensive tactics training. We're passing on policy adjustments to the policy sergeant to make sure that that gets incorporated into changes to policy, as well as, of course, the individual performance issues are being handled through the employees' chain of command. Driving was and continues to be a common theme of that's part of our complaint process, and some of it is just reminding officers that their driving behavior is being noticed, and just to make sure that they are following the rules of the road as necessary and as appropriate.
In an effort, commissioners, in an effort for us to let her complete her report, I'm gonna hold off on any questions until she's done.
I'm getting close to being done.
Go ahead.
Other performance issues could be and have been, just a reminder to check voicemail and respond promptly to emails and voicemail. Basic customer service and follow through with investigations. De-escalation techniques is something that was identified in several complaints this year, use of force reviews, and managing public perception. I think there's so much that can be gained when it's safe to do so for officers to offer explanations on scene, to try to get ahead of any misunderstandings or complaints that might come in. So that's something that is encouraged. Oh, that's that slide. Training. I've added some more detailed information in your report that was provided to you with some of the changes that we've made and enhancements we've made in our training unit this year that started in 2020. We expanded the unit. Lieutenant's been assigned out there full time, and they've taken on a lot of pretty amazing training endeavors this last year. They also continue to provide some of that high risk training that Captain Adams mentioned in terms of pursuits and forcible vehicle stops, as well as defensive tactics, de-escalation techniques, and critical skills. I mean, one of the things that is important to remember is they do a lot of scenario-based training, which can incorporate and does incorporate de-escalation in just about every training that they do. So that has been another focus this year. Policies and practices. This is just a list of the highlights of the policies I believe that you all helped review last year. Represents quite a bit of work here. Okay, that is the end of my PowerPoint presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen unless you have any questions and I should bring it back up. I certainly can do that.
We can do a couple of questions, no problem. Commissioner Shivers?
So I have two questions. I'll start with the most important. I saw in your written report, though it wasn't in this presentation, that we had hosted a number of trainings at the department, including one by the Force Science Institute on a de-escalation training. Given public sentiment on the Institute's other work, I was wondering if the Force Science Institute or another group might be coming to provide more de-escalation services in exchange for office space once lockdown is over.
You know, I don't have the answer, the specific answer to in specific training questions, but I thought that I had heard that we were going to do some different de-escalation or use training with a different vendor.
Can we have Jeremy get back to you with that information?
That works.
You had a second question.
Yeah, the second question was, I saw canines had a 94% success rate when finding narcotics. I was just wondering if that 6% was because no narcotics were found, or because narcotics were found and the dogs did not find them.
I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know the specifics because again, those cases are not processed through internal affairs. Only the actual use of force on the canines were processed through my office.
Commissioner Winbrow?
Thank you so much for that, Cindy. Really appreciate the presentation, and I was, always excited to go into the data and have some of the narrative behind it too. I remember last time that y'all presented, I was struck by how y'all identified trends with 3 years of data. And I was wondering for future reports, if we could have a little bit longer of a time horizon than 3 years. I remember Jeremy was talking about it was a policy or best practice instituted by a former chief to have 3 years of data. And I remember one of your slides had 10 years and seeing that kind of robust little snapshot of 10 years is easier for me, because then I think to myself, what are the correlations here? Maybe I can look at national crime data or crime data in Oregon and look to policies that were instituted locally, and maybe there's an impact for policy that's generated, and then maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years down the road, seeing potential relationships between policies that were passed and then impacts that were resultant of that. And so really appreciate some of the kind of micro trends that you had year to year or year over 2 years. Something that would help for the future for me is having a longer time horizon, just so I could start to noodle around with kind of thinking through some questions around maybe there's connections that I'm not seeing or that I think that I'm seeing between policies that may have been passed at certain times and trends in policing that have been impacted by the policies passed years down the road.
Okay.
We have time for one more question. Commissioner Shivers? You good?
I am completely done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Cindy. That was an
You're very
excellent
welcome.
report.
Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, so before we begin our commissioner closing comments, I'm going to give an opportunity for Councilor Zelenka, who's joined us. Do you have any type of liaison report you'd like to give?
The only thing I would comment on is coming up on the agenda for a council on the 19th of July. We're going to have a conversation about the ad hoc committee on police policy, where and that's community forum, and then the conversation is going to be on the 26th. So both of those are two things coming up on the council agenda. And thanks for. Sorry, I had to be late. I had a town hall meeting with Representative Wilde and Councilor Keating from 5:30 to 6:30.
Well, thank you. We're going to begin with closing comments. Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. I don't have any closing comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Roberts has exited. Commissioner Winbrock.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for both of the reports. They were wonderful to get this information, and it's so much more robust being able to hear the narrative behind the data. And then I just wanted to invite folks to the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. They're hosting a Black Lives Matter art exhibit that's curated with local artists from around Lane County that are doing installations. The opening ceremony was today from 5 to 7, so I didn't make it. But I think that it's, again, a community forum where if police commission representatives were there, it certainly would go noticed. And I know that it's going to be something that's long lived for the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy and Leah, for your insightful presentations. You've obviously put a lot of work into these two presentations, and it shows. You know, I've learned a lot tonight, and the interactive Q&A was very useful in helping me to understand the information as well. So thank you.
Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for keeping up the upcoming agenda items. Especially as we re-engage the community, that's going to be extremely helpful. So I wanted to thank you for keeping that going. I was also hoping, Ian, if you could send out information on the art exhibit, maybe to Jeremy, who can disseminate it. That'd be lovely. And
I'd be happy
thank you all
to.
for being here.
Jeremy, I'll send that to you after the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you for your support. This was my very first meeting as chair. What I witnessed tonight was a very good pulse of where we want to take it to the next level. I saw a lot of involvement. There is no question, in my opinion, that comes from a commissioner's mouth that's not a good question. So I don't want anyone to feel that any question is this, because for some reason, we need you to be satisfied with the answers. And that's my job and Jeremy's job and so forth, because I truly believe we can make a difference. I want this commission to be looked upon as someone that the community can count on. And there's a lot of trust building that we need to do. And that's why those questions come out. No, there is no question that's bad. Every question is good. The more I hear from you, the more we know what's going on. I'd like to make a motion that we conclude this meeting.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that we clarify as upcoming meeting dates, as in Police Commission tradition, we do not have an August Police Commission meeting in line with the council break to allow our counselors and you a break. And the other reminder is on September 9th. Right now, your packet has the location listed to be determined, but this was a practice run to see if we could hold a meeting that was a hybrid. that was both virtual and in person. And I believe the intent is to.
I'll take responsibility for it. My intention is to see you all in person as quickly as possible. And if anyone cannot, we have the technology available that you would still be joining said meeting. But the more we can get together, the more we as a unit can get together, I believe it's better for us all. Commissioner Dominguez.
Thank you. It had been mentioned that there is a possibility to hold the commission meetings possibly in the public library. I do not drive and I feel uncomfortable driving out to the police station. I just wanted to make that known, and thank you. But I'm perfectly happy doing hybrid. But if you do want me there, then that would be better for me, just so you know.
Well, I can guarantee you 100%, we want you here. We want you here. Anything else that you have before we conclude?
No, I believe that's it for me.
Your time is valuable. We will be concluding this meeting. Enjoy the month off, and we'll see you soon. Can I get a motion for that?
Do we have quorum?
Can I get a second?
Yes.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Wynn, for the second. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
You did great. I loved it. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.
See y'all.
See you.